There are some moments in life that just etch themselves into your memory, not because they're grand or pivotal, but because they're so utterly humiliating. They reshape you. For me, that moment happened last spring, at my family's annual charity gala, the kind of event where everyone dresses to impress, smiles are plastered on, and the air is thick with unspoken competition and judgment. And I, Sarah, was, as usual, caught right in the crosshairs. I had just arrived, a little late as always, navigating the sea of glittering guests in my admittedly simple, but elegant, black dress. I felt a familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. These events were always a minefield. My parents, successful in their own right, and my older sister, Emily, the golden child, thrived in this environment. I, on the other hand, always felt like an awkward afterthought. I spotted Emily across the crowded ballroom, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her designer gown shimmering under the chandeliers. She was holding court, surrounded by a small group of influential-looking people, including a few city council members and what looked like a prominent local business owner. My stomach clenched. Emily loved an audience, and she loved to perform, and her favorite performance, it seemed, was showcasing my supposed failures. As I made my way towards the bar, hoping to blend into the background, Emily's piercing voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Sarah, darling, you finally made it." My heart sank. Too late. She waved me over, her smile too wide, too bright. I plastered on my own polite smile and walked towards the group, already bracing myself. "Hi, Emily. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." "Oh, don't you worry about it, sweetie," she purred, her arms snaking around my waist in a gesture that felt less like an embrace and more like an act of possession. "Everyone knows how busy you are with, your things." She emphasized your things with a knowing look that implied your pointless hobbies. Then, the moment I'd been dreading. She turned to the group, her smile widening. "Everyone, this is my sister, Sarah." She paused, letting the name hang in the air, building the anticipation. I could practically feel the air being sucked out of the room. "And," she continued, a mischievous glint in her eye, "she's been such a lifesaver for us lately, with all the demands of running a household and managing our social calendar. It's just been impossible to keep up. So, Sarah has been helping us out, keeping everything in order." My mind raced. What was she doing? She wasn't introducing me as a professional, or even as family. She was introducing me in a role that reeked of servitude. "In fact," she pressed on, leaning into the punchline, "she's been absolutely invaluable. We practically have her on call. She's almost like our personal maid." A snicker from one of the council members, a polite, forced chuckle from another. Emily beamed, clearly delighted with her joke. My parents, who had just joined the group, offered weak, apologetic smiles, a silent endorsement of her cruel words. My face flushed hot, then cold. My vision blurred slightly, and I could feel my hands trembling. If you've ever felt like your own family has deliberately tried to shrink you, to make you feel small and insignificant in front of others, then you know this exact, gut-wrenching pain. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, the casual dismissal, the thinly veiled contempt, delivered with such practiced ease. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being the other, the problem child, the one who never quite measured up to the gilded standards of the family. My mind reeled, pulling me back through years of similar slights. Growing up, Emily was always the star. She was effortlessly popular, excelled in everything from ballet to debate, and pursued a respectable career in corporate finance. My parents adored her, openly showering her with praise and opportunities. And me, I was the quiet, introspective one who loved books and spent hours dissecting how things worked. Whether it was dismantling an old radio or coding simple programs on our clunky family computer, my interests were often dismissed as unladylike or nerdy. "Why don't you try something more social?" Sarah, my mother, would often ask, a hint of concern in her voice. "You're too smart to be stuck inside." My father, a successful real estate developer, always emphasized practicality and networking, When I chose to study computer science, he scoffed. Computers, that's a hobby, Sarah, not a career. You need to be out there, making connections, building a real empire like your sister. The comparison was constant, a relentless drumbeat of, you are not enough, not like Emily. When I graduated, instead of joining a big corporation or pursuing an MBA like Emily, I chose a less conventional path. I was fascinated by urban planning, specifically how technology could be used to optimize city infrastructure and create more sustainable, livable communities. I started working for a small, innovative startup that focused on smart city solutions. To my family, this was a clear sign of failure. A startup, Sarah. Are you serious? My mother had wailed. That's so risky. What about benefits? A pension. Emily is already a senior analyst at a prestigious firm. My father simply shook his head. You're throwing away your potential. You need stability, a proper career. We invested so much in your education, and this is what you do with it. The unspoken debt, the emotional leverage, was always there, hanging over every decision I made. They constantly offered to help me, which always translated to offers of low-paying, soul-crushing administrative jobs within their network, or loans that came with strings attached tighter than a violin string. I always refused, which only fueled their narrative of my stubbornness and inability to accept good advice. She's so ungrateful. I once overheard my aunt whisper at a family dinner, after I politely declined my father's offer to set me up with a job at his friend's accounting firm. They just want what's best for her, and she pushes them away. The gaslighting was subtle but pervasive. If I ever expressed hurt or frustration, it was twisted back on me. We're only trying to help you, Sarah. You're too sensitive. Or, you always misinterpret our intentions. We love you, but we worry. It left me constantly questioning my own perceptions, my own feelings. Was I really the problem? Was I truly too sensitive? Too difficult? For years, I played along to some extent, sharing only vague details about my work, never truly letting them see the depth of my commitment or the scope of my projects. I minimized my achievements, knowing that celebrating them would only invite more skepticism, more comparisons to Emily's real successes. I kept my head down, working tirelessly, building my expertise, slowly but surely making a name for myself in the niche, but rapidly growing, field of urban tech innovation. What they didn't know, couldn't fathom, was the sheer scale of the projects I was now involved in. My little startup had grown. I had moved up the ranks, becoming the lead architect on several groundbreaking initiatives, including a massive smart transportation overhaul for a major metropolitan area. This wasn't just about traffic lights. It was about integrating AI, optimizing public transit, reducing emissions, and creating a more interconnected, efficient urban landscape. It was complex, challenging, and deeply fulfilling work. My work connected me with real decision-makers, people who saw my expertise, not my family's preconceived notions of my worth. I regularly met with city planners, department heads, and even high-ranking municipal officials. The mayor herself, an incredibly sharp and progressive leader, had taken a personal interest in our project. She often referred to me as a visionary, a word I never imagined hearing in connection to myself, especially not from my own family. My best friend, Lena, an unapologetically blunt artist, was my only confidant outside of work. She was the one who saw through their charade, the one who constantly reminded me of my value. They're just jealous, Sarah, she'd say, nursing a coffee. Or maybe they're just incapable of seeing anything that doesn't fit their narrow worldview. Don't dim your light for them. Lena had been pushing me for months to stop hiding my success. Why do you let them treat you like this? You're designing cities. For crying out loud, you're making a real impact. While Emily is just pushing papers. Her words were harsh, but necessary. They started to chip away at the years of self-doubt. I still had a hard time fully embracing my success publicly, especially around my family. The ingrained fear of their disapproval, their condescending smiles, was deeply embedded. So, I continued my quiet ascent, a secret queen building her invisible kingdom. While my family continued to treat me like a forgotten serf, that night, at the gala, Emily's words were the final straw. Our personal maid. The phrase echoed in my ears, bouncing off the polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. It wasn't just a slight, it was a public declaration of my worthlessness in their eyes. It stripped away all pretense of familial love, revealing the raw, ugly contempt beneath. I stood there, exposed and humiliated, but also, strangely, enlightened. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't me being too sensitive. This was deliberate, this was malicious, and in that moment of profound shame, a slow, burning rage began to simmer. A rage that wasn't destructive, but transformative. It ignited a spark of defiance, a fierce refusal to be diminished any longer. My eyes, which had been downcast in embarrassment, slowly lifted. I looked at Emily, her triumphant smile still in place. I looked at my parents, their expressions a mix of discomfort and passive agreement, and in that frozen tableau, I saw them not as family who loved me, but as antagonists who had actively sought to suppress me. Trust me, you won't believe what happened next. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. This was it, the breaking point, the moment where I stopped being the quiet, compliant Sarah, and started fighting back, not with anger, not with tears, but with the undeniable truth of who I had become. The humiliation was real, yes, but it was also the catalyst. It pushed me past the point of no return, into a new, empowered version of myself. The maid was about to become the master of her own destiny. That night, after Emily's cruel joke had landed like a punch to the gut, I didn't go home immediately. I couldn't. The thought of being alone with the echo of her words was unbearable. Instead, I drove to Lena's apartment, my vision still blurry from the unshed tears and the humiliation. She opened the door, took one look at my flushed face and trembling hands, and without a word, pulled me into a tight hug. Lena knew. She always knew. They did it again, didn't they? She murmured, rubbing my back gently. I just nodded, burying my face in her shoulder. She called me their maid, in front of everyone. The mayor's chief of staff was there. Lena. People I actually work with. The last words came out in a choked whisper. Lena pulled back, her eyes flashing with a familiar fire. That's it, Sarah, I'm done. You're done. This is not okay. You have built an incredible career. You're doing groundbreaking work, and they still treat you like this. She gestured wildly. It's beyond unacceptable. It's malicious. Her words, sharp and direct, were exactly what I needed. For too long, I had minimized their behavior, excused it as just how families are, or blamed myself for being too sensitive. But Lena's unwavering conviction, her fierce loyalty, cut through all the self-doubt. She saw the truth, unvarnished. For years, I tried to convince myself that their dismissiveness was just tough love, that their criticisms came from a place of genuine concern. If you've ever found yourself making excuses for toxic behavior, believing that it's somehow your fault, then you understand the depth of that psychological entanglement. My family's subtle, yet pervasive. Emotional abuse began early. Emily, the golden child, was effortlessly charming, excelling in every conventional pursuit. I, the quiet, analytical one, was always measured against her shimmering achievements and found wanting. Why can't you be more like your sister? Sarah, was a refrain echoed throughout my childhood. If Emily brought home an A+, it was celebrated with fanfare. If I did, it was met with a lukewarm. That's nice, dear. But did you try out for the cheerleading squad like Emily? My parents, particularly my father, were obsessed with appearances and conventional success. He was a prominent real estate developer, and his life was a meticulously constructed facade of wealth and influence. He believed in tangible assets, visible power. My love for systems, for the invisible architecture that made things work, was beyond his comprehension. What's the point of all that computer gibberish? Sarah, he'd often scoff. You can't buy a house with gibberish. When I chose urban planning and smart city development, a field that was still nascent but clearly on the cusp of revolutionizing infrastructure, they reacted with outright dismay. That's not a real job, my mother had declared. as if my chosen path was a personal affront. Emily is already on the fast track at a top investment bank. You need to think about stability, a good husband, a family. The implication was clear. My professional aspirations were secondary to finding a suitable partner who could take care of me, because I, in their eyes, was fundamentally incapable of taking care of myself. Their financial manipulation was perhaps the most insidious. They never openly denied me anything essential, but every act of generosity came with a heavy price tag of control. When I was in college, struggling with tuition despite scholarships, they'd offer to help. "Of course, darling, we'll cover the rest of your tuition," my father would say, a benevolent smile on his face. "But maybe you should consider a business degree far more practical than all that urban studies nonsense, and we could help you get an internship at a real company." The help was always conditional, a thinly veiled attempt to redirect my life onto their preferred trajectory. Even after I started my career and began earning a good salary, they continued to treat me as financially precarious. "Are you sure you're saving enough, Sarah?" my mother would fret. "Your apartment is so small. Don't you want something bigger? We could help you with a down payment, but you'd have to listen to our advice this time." Their advice always meant micromanaging my life, and their help meant a perpetual state of obligation. I constantly felt the pressure to prove myself. To earn their approval, I worked tirelessly, often sacrificing sleep and personal relationships, pushing myself to excel in my field. I developed innovative solutions for traffic management, optimized energy consumption systems for public buildings, and streamlined waste management processes for entire districts. My projects were lauded within the industry. But to my family, they remained invisible. "Oh, Sarah's just doing her little computer thing," Emily would dismissively tell relatives, her tone dripping with condescension. "She's so busy with her maps and her numbers. Bless her heart." This narrative, reinforced by my parents' quiet nods, became the accepted truth within our extended family. I was the well-meaning but ultimately unsuccessful hobbyist. The emotional toll of this double life was immense. By day, I was a respected professional, a lead architect on multi-million-dollar urban tech projects, collaborating with brilliant minds. By night, or whenever I interacted with my family, I was Sarah, the failure, the one who needed help, the one who was perpetually dabbling. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. I'd often come home from a high-stakes meeting where my ideas had been celebrated, only to call my mother and listen to her lament about my unstable career choices. There were moments of despair, when I almost believed their narrative myself. Was I truly deluding myself? Was my passion for smart cities just a childish fantasy? But then, I'd remember the tangible impact of my work, the measurable reduction in traffic congestion, the improved air quality, the enhanced public safety through integrated sensor networks. I was building things that truly mattered, affecting real lives, solving complex problems that even my father's vast real estate empire couldn't address. Have you ever had to deal with that exhausting push and pull, trying to be one person for the world and another for your family? My work, especially the project that connected me with the mayor's office, became my sanctuary. It was a world where merit mattered, where intelligence was celebrated, and where my contributions were not just seen, but valued. The mayor, a formidable woman named Evelyn Monroe, was particularly impressed with my vision for a citywide integrated transport and sustainability network. She saw past my quiet demeanor, recognizing the steel and intellect beneath. "Miss Hayes," she'd often say during our strategy meetings, her piercing blue eyes fixing on me. "Your insights are invaluable. You have a unique ability to bridge the gap between abstract technology and tangible urban improvement. We need your kind of thinking." Her words were like a balm to my soul, soothing the wounds inflicted by years of familial dismissal. The mayor's chief of staff, a no-nonsense woman named Maria Rodriguez, became another unexpected ally. She was always direct, always supportive, and fiercely protective of her team. She saw the long hours I put in, the dedication I brought to every challenge. She knew the sacrifices I made, and she knew exactly who I was, professionally. I remember one particularly grueling week when we were preparing a critical proposal for city council. I worked straight through, Fueled by coffee and sheer determination, my mother called, demanding I attend a distant relative's birthday party. "It's important, Sarah, family obligation. You're always so absent," I tried to explain, to politely decline, but she just huffed. "Honestly, Sarah, always making excuses. What could possibly be more important than family?" I didn't tell her that what was more important was a multi-million-dollar contract that would redefine urban mobility for our entire city. A contract that would directly benefit hundreds of thousands of residents. A project I had poured my heart and soul into. I just mumbled an apology and hung up, feeling that familiar pang of guilt and frustration. It was during these times that Lena became even more crucial. "You're living a parallel universe, Sarah," she pointed out one evening, after I'd recounted another frustrating family interaction. "In one, you're a groundbreaking urban tech architect. In the other, you're the family's unreliable charity case. You can't keep doing both forever." Her words resonated deeply. The weariness was starting to catch up to me. The constant effort of maintaining the facade, of deflecting their criticisms, of enduring their pity, it was draining my energy, dimming my light. I realized I was sacrificing my own well-being for the illusion of familial peace, a peace that never truly existed. I started to reflect on their expectations. They wanted me to be wealthy, but only if that wealth came from a respectable source and was readily available for their needs. They wanted me to be successful, but only if that success was easily understood by their outdated metrics and didn't overshadow Emily. They wanted me to be happy, but only if my happiness fit within the narrow confines of their preconceived notions for my life. I realized that their definition of failure for me was actually a reflection of their own limitations, their own insecurities, my unconventional path, my quiet triumphs, my independent spirit. These were things they couldn't control, couldn't categorize, and therefore couldn't accept. And because they couldn't accept them, they chose to dismiss them, to diminish them, to gaslight me into believing I was the problem. The irony was, while they labeled me a failure, I was becoming more successful, more influential, and more financially secure than any of them could imagine. I was receiving accolades in my field, flying to conferences as a keynote speaker, and advising major corporations on future urban development. I was building a reputation that far surpassed Emily's corporate climb. Not that they would ever know it, my true financial status was a well-guarded secret, allowing me to continue living relatively modestly, free from their attempts to siphon off my earnings or leverage them for their own ends. I was learning to embrace the strength of my quiet nature. I didn't need grand pronouncements or public displays of wealth to feel successful. My satisfaction came from the impact of my work, the intellectual challenge, and the genuine respect I earned from my peers. This was a quiet, internal victory, one that they couldn't take away from me. But the incident at the gala, Emily's cruel public jab, shattered that quiet peace. It was a line crossed, a blatant disrespect that could not be ignored. It forced me to confront the reality that hiding my success, while protecting me from their direct interference, also allowed them to continue their toxic narrative unchallenged. It allowed them to introduce me as their Maid. Something snapped within me. The humiliation was a spark, igniting a fierce determination. I had tried to be polite. I had tried to be patient. I had tried to be understanding. But now, it was time for them to understand. It was time for them to see the truth, whether they liked it or not. The quiet ascent was over. It was time for the grand unveiling. The maid was about to take her rightful place. The sting of Emily's words, the echo of our personal maid, vibrated through me long after I left the gala. But what had initially been a raw, searing humiliation began to morph into something else. It was a cold, hard clarity, like the sharp snap of winter air after a suffocating summer. I sat on Lena's couch, the pizza long forgotten, recounting every humiliating detail, not with tears, but with a growing, simmering resolve. Lena listened, her expressive face a mirror of my own churning emotions, disbelief, anger, and finally, a fierce determination. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes. She didn't tell me it would be okay. Instead, she just looked at me, her eyes steady, "This is it, Sarah," she said, her voice firm. "This is your line in the sand. You can't go back from this. This isn't just about them being jerks. This is about them actively trying to degrade you, to invalidate your entire existence. You have to decide now, are you going to let them keep doing it? Or are you finally going to fight back?" Her words were a stark, necessary jolt. For years, I had walked a tightrope, trying to balance my burgeoning professional life with my family's relentless need to control and diminish me. I had hidden my successes, minimized my achievements, and silently endured their condescension, all in a desperate, futile attempt to maintain some semblance of peace. But Emily's public declaration had shattered that illusion. There was no peace to be found in their world, only a constant, exhausting battle for my own identity. If you've ever reached that moment where you realize the cost of staying silent, of holding back your truth, is far greater than the fear of speaking up, then you understand this turning point. The next few days were a blur of intense introspection. I didn't answer my parents' vague checking-in calls. I ignored Emily's follow-up texts, probably designed to gauge if her joke had landed the desired blow. Instead, I immersed myself in my work, but with a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about building smart cities anymore. It was about building a fortress around myself. A life so undeniably successful and self-sufficient that their criticisms would become nothing more than faint, irrelevant whispers. I spent hours journaling, sifting through years of memories. I saw the patterns clearly now, every helpful suggestion that was actually a demand, every loan that was a leash, every concern that was thinly veiled judgment. I remembered my parents pushing me towards stable careers, constantly reminding me of the sacrifices they made for my education, subtly implying I owed them a specific outcome. My father's dismissive remarks about my computer gibberish came flooding back. He, a man obsessed with tangible assets and visible success, could never comprehend the abstract, yet profoundly impactful nature of my work in urban tech. He believed in brick and mortar, invisible structures. My structures were digital, a complex web of algorithms and data, designed to make cities smarter, greener, more efficient. They were invisible to the casual eye, but their impact was undeniable. I also remembered my mother's incessant comparisons to Emily. "Your sister is so graceful, so charming. You're so intense, Sarah." Or, "Emily always knows the right thing to say. You're too blunt." They inadvertently taught me that my intelligence, my analytical mind, and my directness were flaws, not strengths. For so long, I believed them. But now, working in a field where analytical thinking and direct problem-solving were paramount, these very traits were celebrated. I realized the insidious nature of their control. It wasn't just about money or career. It was about my emotional landscape. They wanted to control how I felt about myself, ensuring I remained insecure enough to seek their approval, dependent enough to accept their help, and small enough not to overshadow Emily. The Maid comment wasn't just a joke. It was their ultimate attempt to define me, to strip away my professional identity and reduce me to a subservient role within their gilded cage. It was Lena who urged me to take the next step. "You need to talk to someone, Sarah, someone who can help you dismantle all that crap they built inside your head." She recommended a therapist specializing in family trauma and self-esteem, Dr. Anya Sharma. Dr. Sharma was a revelation. She was calm, perceptive, and had a knack for asking questions that unearthed layers of buried emotions. In our sessions, I began to unravel the complex tapestry of my family's dynamics. Dr. Sharma helped me understand that my parents' need for control stemmed from their own anxieties and insecurities. They projected their rigid definition of success onto their children, and anyone who deviated from that path became a threat to their carefully constructed world. "Your worth is not dictated by their approval, Sarah," Dr. Sharma explained gently. "Their inability to see your success is a reflection of their own limitations, not yours. You are enough, just as you are, and you don't owe them an explanation or a performance." This was a profoundly liberating realization. I didn't need to explain my career to them. I didn't need to justify my choices. Their perception of me was their problem, not mine. This knowledge gave me immense power. It allowed me to detach, to stop internalizing their criticisms, to simply be. With Dr. Sharma's guidance, I started practicing setting firm boundaries. This wasn't just about saying no to their demands. It was about a fundamental shift in my approach to them. I stopped volunteering information about my work. When they asked probing questions, I offered vague, polite, non-committal answers. Work is busy. I'm doing well. I kept my responses short, emotionless, offering no hooks for them to latch onto. When my mother tried to guilt-trip me about not attending a family dinner, I simply stated, I have a prior commitment. No apologies, no elaborate excuses, just a statement of fact. Her indignant silence on the other end of the line was a small but significant victory. Each boundary I set felt like a tiny act of defiance, slowly chipping away at their control. My renewed focus on work was intense. The major smart city project I was leading for the municipality was entering its critical implementation phase. It was a multi-year, multi-million-dollar initiative to transform the city's entire public infrastructure through advanced technology. We were integrating AI-powered traffic management systems, developing smart grids for energy efficiency, and deploying sensor networks for real-time environmental monitoring. It was groundbreaking work, and I was at the helm. I was working closely with the mayor, Evelyn Monroe, and her chief of staff, Maria Rodriguez. They were strong, intelligent women who operated with absolute professionalism and appreciated competence above all else. They saw my dedication, my analytical mind, and my innovative approach. They relied on my expertise. I was regularly in meetings with them, discussing policy, budgets, and the intricate technical details of the project. Trust me, you won't believe the level of dedication this kind of work requires, and the absolute thrill of seeing your vision come to life. There were countless challenges, bureaucracy, technical glitches, budget constraints, but I thrived under the pressure. Every problem solved, every milestone achieved, was a quiet testament to my capabilities. I was leading a team of brilliant engineers, urban planners, and data scientists. I was presenting to city council, negotiating with contractors, and overseeing vast, complex systems. This was not the work of a maid or a hobbyist. This was the work of a highly competent, influential professional. One particular hurdle involved securing additional funding for a crucial phase of the smart grid implementation. It required presenting a detailed, persuasive case to a joint committee of the city council and key business leaders. The mayor herself would be there, lending her support. But the presentation rested entirely on my shoulders. I spent weeks preparing, poring over data, refining my arguments, anticipating every possible question. During this intense period, my family continued their subtle interference. Emily called, ostensibly to catch up, but quickly veered into thinly veiled criticisms. Still playing with your little city models. Sarah, you should really come intern at my firm. Get some real-world experience. She didn't know that my little city models were actual, sprawling urban infrastructure projects that dwarfed anything she did in corporate finance. My mother invited me to a distant relative's birthday, emphasizing, "It's important to keep up appearances, dear, especially since you're not doing much these days." The casual cruelty of her words, juxtaposed with the immense pressure and responsibility I was shouldering, was almost comical. I calmly declined both invitations, citing unavoidable work commitments. The familiar huffs of disapproval, the passive-aggressive sighs, were now met with a newfound indifference on my part. Their opinions, their judgments, felt distant, like noise from another room. My focus was razor-sharp on my work, on the tangible impact I was making. The city council presentation was a resounding success. I presented with a quiet confidence, my arguments backed by irrefutable data and a clear vision for the city's future. The committee members were engaged, asking pointed questions that I answered with precision and expertise. When I finished, the room erupted in applause. Mayor Monroe herself stood up, walking directly to me. "Miss Hayes," she announced, her voice ringing through the chamber, "your dedication and foresight are truly transforming our city. On behalf of the entire administration, thank you for your extraordinary leadership on this vital project." She then shook my hand, holding it firmly, her eyes conveying genuine respect. That moment, the mayor's public acknowledgement, was a profound validation. It wasn't just about the funding. It was about being seen, truly seen. For my contributions, it was a silent, powerful retort to every single doubt my family had ever cast upon me. The weight of their unseen burdens, the pressure of living a double life, began to lift. I realized then that my journey wasn't just about escaping their toxicity. It was about defining my own success, on my own terms. It was about finding my purpose, cultivating my skills, and building a life that resonated with my authentic self. The maid was indeed becoming the master, not just of her own destiny, but of significant, impactful projects that truly served the public good. The mayor's open admiration for my work, the respect for my colleagues, and the undeniable positive impact of the smart city initiatives were the real trophies. They weren't flashy or designed for public consumption in my family's social circles, but they were deeply meaningful. I had achieved something truly substantial, something beyond their limited scope of understanding. The knowledge that the mayor, a powerful and respected figure, knew who I was, truly knew my capabilities, became my secret weapon. It wasn't a weapon of revenge, but one of truth. It was the ultimate, irrefutable counter-narrative to their failure story. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the day would come when this truth would finally collide with their carefully constructed fiction. The stage was being set for a revelation that would leave them speechless. The quiet ascent had truly begun. After the Maid incident at the gala and the profound revelations unearthed with Dr. Sharma, my focus sharpened to a diamond point. My days became a precise dance between maintaining a semblance of normalcy for my family, a carefully crafted facade of Sarah, the struggling tech dabbler, and leading a multi-million-dollar urban transformation project that was rapidly gaining national attention. This period wasn't about seeking their validation anymore. It was about solidifying my own foundation, piece by unshakable piece. You know that feeling when you're working on something truly massive, something that feels bigger than yourself, and the rest of the world just fades away. That's what my life became. The Smart City Initiative wasn't just a job, it was my calling. We were in the thick of designing and implementing a cutting-edge smart transportation network for the entire metropolitan area. This involved far more than just traffic lights. We were integrating AI-powered traffic flow optimization, developing predictive maintenance systems for public transit, and deploying sensor networks to monitor everything from air quality to pedestrian movement. The goal was to create a seamless, efficient, and environmentally sustainable urban ecosystem. It was complex, challenging, and exhilarating. My days were a whirlwind of meetings with city engineers, urban planners, and software developers. I spent hours dissecting data, reviewing architectural designs, and troubleshooting complex algorithms. I was often the only woman, and typically the youngest, in rooms filled with seasoned experts. But my voice, once timid and apologetic around my family, was now authoritative and confident in these professional spaces. My ideas were heard, debated, and more often than not, implemented. Meanwhile, the charade with my family continued. My phone, a constant buzzing portal to my professional world, was often silent when it came to them. I had learned to screen their calls, to let them go to voicemail, and to respond only when I had the emotional bandwidth to deal with their subtle manipulations. "Are you still doing that computer mapping thing, Sarah?" my mother would ask, her tone dripping with polite pity during our infrequent calls. "Your cousin Jessica just got a huge promotion. She's practically running her department. Don't you ever wish you had something more structured?" I'd just offer a vague, non-committal answer. "It's going well, Mom. Very demanding work." I learned to use professional jargon they wouldn't understand, like optimizing distributed ledger technologies for urban infrastructure, or integrating hyperconverged solutions for real-time data analytics. It was subtly defiant, feeding their narrative that I was in a world they couldn't comprehend. But without actually lying, it reinforced their belief that my work was obscure and probably insignificant, which, perversely, gave me the space to achieve truly significant things. My father, the financial sentinel, still tried to pry into my finances. Are you really making enough to manage that downtown apartment? Sarah, your brother just bought a beautiful new vacation home. If you ever need to borrow, we could arrange something. With a reasonable repayment plan? Of course. The implication was always that I was barely scraping by, and that any help would come with an ironclad leash. I'd smile to myself. My downtown apartment was a carefully chosen, modest space that allowed me to save and invest aggressively. What they didn't know was that my compensation, including performance bonuses and equity in the rapidly growing firm, far surpassed anything they could imagine for me. My personal net worth was several times that of Emily's, and certainly more than my father believed possible for someone outside his traditional real estate empire. I had deliberately kept my lifestyle modest, avoiding flashy displays of wealth, not just for privacy, but to deny them any financial leverage. I'm doing very well, Dad. My investments are solid. No need to worry. My calm dismissal of his offers clearly frustrated him. He was a man who understood transactions and control through money, and I was denying him both. The greatest challenge during this period was the constant mental energy required to maintain these two distinct personas. By day, I was Sarah Hayes, lead urban tech architect, a respected professional addressing municipal challenges. By night, or on family calls, I was Sarah, the unproven, hobbyist daughter. The weight of that dual identity could be exhausting, but the knowledge that I was actively building a life of profound impact, completely independent of their judgment, fueled my resolve. My working relationship with Mayor Evelyn Monroe deepened significantly. She was a visionary leader, and she trusted my expertise implicitly. We had frequent one-on-one meetings, discussing everything from the future of autonomous public transport to ethical data governance for citizen privacy. She saw my drive, my intellectual rigor, and my unwavering commitment to public service. "Miss Hayes," she said to me one afternoon, after a particularly productive strategy session, "your ability to translate complex technological concepts into tangible civic improvements is remarkable. You are a truly invaluable asset to this city." Her words resonated deeply. They were the antidote to decades of parental dismissal. I was also working closely with Maria Rodriguez, the mayor's chief of staff. Maria was pragmatic, no nonsense, and fiercely loyal to her team and to the mayor's vision. She understood the political and logistical complexities of implementing such a large-scale project, and she valued my ability to navigate both the technical and bureaucratic hurdles. We often stayed late, poring over blueprints and budget proposals, fueled by strong coffee and an unshakable belief in our mission. Maria knew the real me, the professional, the leader. Trust me, you won't believe the kind of late nights and sacrifices that go into building something truly groundbreaking. But the payoff, seeing it come to life, is everything. One critical phase of the project involved the public rollout of a new smart public transit app that seamlessly integrated bus, subway, and rideshare options, optimized by AI to reduce wait times and carbon emissions. It was my team's crowning achievement for that quarter, and it was going to be officially launched at a major press conference. With the mayor herself presiding, I was scheduled to be a key speaker, demonstrating the app's functionality and its broader impact on urban life. The week leading up to the launch was pure chaos. Long hours, last-minute bug fixes, media training. I was barely sleeping, of course. This was the week my mother decided to organize a surprise family dinner. "Sarah, you simply must come," she insisted over the phone, her voice sweetened with artificial concern. "It's Aunt Carol's birthday, and she'd be so disappointed if her favorite niece wasn't there. You're always so busy with whatever it is you do." I stifled a sigh. "Mom, I genuinely can't. This is a critical week for a major project. I'm working almost around the clock." "Oh, Sarah, always with the excuses." She sighed dramatically. "Can't you just take a few hours off? It's just family. What could possibly be more important?" I almost laughed. What could be more important? The launch of a system that would revolutionize public transport for millions, reduce the city's carbon footprint, and solidify my reputation as a national expert. No, that certainly couldn't compare to Aunt Carol's fruitcake. I truly can't, Mom. My work requires my full attention. Please give Aunt Carol my love. I hung up, feeling a familiar pang of guilt, quickly overridden by the knowledge that my priorities were now fundamentally different. Their disapproval no longer had the power to derail me. The app launch was a resounding success. The press conference was packed. The media buzzed with excitement. And the mayor delivered a powerful speech about urban innovation when it was my turn to speak. I walked onto the stage with a sense of quiet pride. I demonstrated the app with ease, explaining its complex algorithms in simple, accessible terms. I articulated our vision for a smarter, more sustainable city with passion and conviction. As I finished, the applause was thunderous. Mayor Monroe shook my hand again, this time with a genuine warmth that was palpable. "You've outdone yourself, Ms. Haas," she whispered. "This is truly monumental." The local news outlets highlighted the project, and my name was mentioned prominently in several articles as the brilliant mind behind the city's new smart transit system. But I knew my family wouldn't see it. Or if they did, they'd dismiss it. They read the society pages, not the tech reviews. They valued visible glamour over impactful innovation, and that was fine. For now. The power I felt wasn't about public recognition, it was about the intrinsic satisfaction of knowing my worth. Independent of external validation, I was good at what I did. I was making a difference. I was building something real and impactful. And that was enough. Yet, a part of me, the part that had been humiliated at the gala, knew that the story wasn't over. The hidden ascent was nearing its public climax. The mayor's growing reliance on my expertise, the increasing visibility of my projects within civic circles, and the sheer undeniable impact of my work meant that the two parallel universes I inhabited were on a collision course. I remembered Emily's mocking words, "our personal maid." A bitter taste filled my mouth, but it was also a motivating force. That comment had been the final, decisive push. It had stripped away all pretense and forced me to confront the reality of their contempt. And in doing so, it had inadvertently given me the clarity and courage to step fully into my power. I knew the mayor was a regular at my family's charity gala. It was a staple in the city's social calendar, and a key event for her administration to connect with prominent donors and influential families. I also knew Emily loved to parade her connections at these events, often introducing important people to her successful family. A thought began to form in my mind. A subtle, yet powerful, plan for the next gala. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. It was about creating a moment where their carefully constructed facade would crack, where the maid would simply exist as herself, and the true power dynamic would be undeniably, unmistakably revealed. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to be present, to allow the universe to connect the dots. The stage was being set, not by my design, but by the relentless march of my own quiet. Undeniable success. The air in the grand ballroom was thick with the scent of lilies and ambition. Another year, another charity gala. This time, however, felt different. I wasn't arriving with dread, but with a quiet, almost exhilarating sense of anticipation. The Maid incident from the previous year had been the crucible, forging a new resolve within me. I was still Sarah, but a Sarah transformed. I walked in, not in a simple black dress, but in a tailored, deep sapphire gown that subtly highlighted my strength, chosen with Lena's discerning eye. It wasn't flashy, but it carried an undeniable presence. I moved through the room, not shrinking into the shadows, but with a confident stride that surprised even myself. My gaze swept over the familiar faces of the city's elite, many of whom I now knew professionally, not just as distant acquaintances at family functions. You know that feeling when you walk into a room where you used to feel small, and suddenly, you realize your presence fills it. It's electric. I spotted my family near the main stage, my parents, Emily, and a scattering of aunts and uncles. Emily, as always, was holding court, draped in shimmering gold, her laugh a little too loud, her gestures a little too dramatic. She was surrounded by the usual suspects, local politicians, prominent business figures, and a few new faces. And then I saw her mayor, Evelyn Monroe. elegant and commanding. Standing just a few feet from Emily, my heart gave a little lurch. This was it. The pieces were falling into place. I wasn't going to seek them out. I had come to understand that true power wasn't about forcing confrontations, but about simply being. I moved towards the quiet corner where the specialized urban planning and tech leaders typically congregated. Many familiar faces nodded, offering genuine smiles and greetings. "Sarah, great to see you here. Fantastic work on the transit app. The mayor is raving about it." These casual remarks, filled with genuine respect, were a balm to my soul, starkly contrasting the condescension I usually receive from my family. Then, Emily's voice cut through the hum. "Sarah, there you are. Darling, we were just talking about you." Her tone was overly sweet, a clear signal that a fresh humiliation was brewing. I straightened my shoulders, a sense of calm settling over me. I wasn't the same Sarah she'd mocked last year. I turned, a polite, almost detached smile on my face, and slowly approached their group. My parents offered faint, uncomfortable smiles. They sensed a shift in me, a new confidence they couldn't quite decipher. "Everyone," Emily announced, her arm sweeping dramatically towards me, drawing all eyes to our corner, her gaze, full of triumph, locked onto mine. "This is my sister, Sarah." She paused, letting the silence hang, recreating the exact setup from last year. My breath caught, but my resolve held. "And," she continued, her voice dripping with amusement, "she's been such a tremendous help to our family this past year, with all my demanding responsibilities. I simply couldn't manage without her. She's just so good at keeping things organized, running errands for us, managing our household needs. We literally have her on call. She's truly indispensable, our very own personal maid." A collective ripple of quiet gasps went through the small gathering. The city council members offered forced smiles, clearly uncomfortable with the blatant disrespect. My parents looked down, suddenly fascinated by the patterns on the carpet. Emily, however, beamed, enjoying the perceived triumph. Her eyes were fixed on me, waiting for me to flinch, to flush, to retreat into my usual embarrassed silence. But I didn't. I stood there, utterly still, absorbing the words. They landed, not as a blow, but as a confirmation of their true nature, their inability to see beyond their own petty narratives. In that moment, the years of pain, of trying to be enough, of constantly seeking their approval, coalesced into a fierce, cold rage. But it wasn't an uncontrolled outburst. It was a strategic, empowering rage. My eyes, which had held a polite neutrality, slowly sharpened, locking onto Emily's triumphant face. I saw the smugness, the satisfaction, and I saw her mistake. If you've ever had that moment when the fear completely vanishes, replaced by an unshakable certainty that you're about to reclaim your power, it's an incredible feeling. Just as the silence stretched, thick with my sister's cruel satisfaction, a new presence entered the circle. A hush fell over the entire ballroom. Then a wave of excited whispers. All heads turned. It was Mayor Evelyn Monroe. She entered, not with a grand announcement, but with an aura of quiet authority that commanded attention. Her eyes scanned the room. And then, to the absolute astonishment of everyone around us, they landed directly on me. She walked purposefully, directly towards our small, frozen group. Emily's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of bewildered confusion. She quickly adjusted her expression to one of polite deference, preparing for the mayor's inevitable acknowledgement of her. My parents straightened, their gazes fixed on the approaching figure, anticipating their moment in the sun. But Mayor Monroe didn't even glance at Emily. She walked right past my sister, past my parents, her gaze unwavering as she approached me. She stopped directly in front of me, her smile genuine and warm. She extended her hand, not for a casual handshake, but in a firm, respectful grasp. "Ms. Hayes," she said, her voice clear and resonant, cutting through the lingering tension in the air. Her eyes met mine, conveying profound respect and appreciation. "I am so incredibly glad I ran into you. I just wanted to personally thank you again for your extraordinary work on the Smart Transit Network. The preliminary data is exceeding all our expectations. and the citizen feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. You have truly revolutionized urban mobility for our city." And then, she leaned in slightly, a subtle gesture of intimacy and trust, her voice dropping just a fraction, but still audible to everyone in our immediate vicinity. "The city owes you a debt of gratitude, ma'am." The word hung in the air, a resounding clap of thunder in the stunned silence that followed. Ma'am. Not just a polite address, but a formal title of respect, often used for women of significant professional standing, especially in official capacities. It was a recognition of my authority, my expertise, my undeniable position, and it was delivered directly to me, unequivocally. While completely ignoring the woman who had just introduced me as her maid, Emily's face, which had been pale with confusion, drained of all color, her jaw went slack. Her eyes darted from the mayor's respectful posture towards me, then to her own flustered parents, then back to me, disbelief warring with dawning, absolute horror. The polite chuckles from the council members turned into awkward coughs and quickly averted gazes. My parents looked like deer caught in headlights. My mother's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. My father's face, usually so composed, contorted with a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. He was a man who understood power, and he was witnessing an undeniable display of it. Directed not at his successful daughter, but at his failed one, I felt a surge of exhilaration, pure and unadulterated. This wasn't about revenge, it was about the raw, undeniable force of truth. I didn't need to say a word. The mayor, a figure of significant authority and public respect, had said it all for me. She had, in one simple, profound gesture, demolished Emily's cruel narrative and elevated me beyond their wildest imaginings. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile, and met the mayor's eyes. "Thank you, Mayor Monroe. It's been an honor to lead the project. I'm glad it's making such a positive impact." My voice was calm, steady, filled with a quiet confidence that was entirely new. The mayor nodded, then turned to the other city officials in the group, including the chief of staff, Maria Rodriguez, who offered me a knowing, supportive smile. "We were just discussing the next phase of the Smart City initiatives. Miss Hayes, I'd love for you to join us for a brief chat. We could use your insights." "Of course, Mayor, I'd be happy to." I turned back to Emily, my parents, and the stunned circle around them. There was no need for a dramatic speech. Their faces said it all: the shock, the humiliation, the utter disbelief. The entire dynamic of their world had just been shattered in a single, public moment. If you've ever watched someone who dismissed you utterly lose their footing, their jaw on the floor, because of your quiet, undeniable success, then you know this feeling of profound vindication. I met Emily's gaze. Her eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and raw, unmasked envy. She tried to say something, but no words came out. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear and polite, but laced with an unyielding finality. "The mayor needs me." And with that, I turned and walked away, not towards the exit, but with the mayor, towards the inner circle of power and influence that I now legitimately occupied. As I walked, I could feel their stunned gazes burning into my back. The silence I left behind was louder than any shout, more devastating than any argument. The maid had just been saluted as ma'am, and their world had just irrevocably changed. The feeling was intoxicating, not because of their discomfort, but because of my newfound freedom. For the first time, I felt truly seen, truly valued, not by the family who had always tried to diminish me, but by the world that truly mattered. This wasn't just a moment, it was a watershed, marking the definitive end of their control and the triumphant beginning of my own, unburdened future. The walk away from my stunned family, towards the mayor and her retinue, felt like a slow-motion ascent. Each step was lighter than the last, shedding the invisible chains that had bound me for decades. The hushed whispers that followed me were no longer judgments, but echoes of their shock and the undeniable shift in power. I joined Mayor Monroe and her team, discussing city initiatives with a clarity and confidence I'd rarely felt around my own flesh and blood. The evening continued, but for me, the gala had served its purpose. The maid was gone. Ma'am had arrived. You know that feeling when you finally break free? It's not just relief, it's an explosion of possibility. The days that followed were a testament to the seismic shift that had occurred. The immediate aftermath was, surprisingly, not filled with apologies, but with a different kind of silence from my family. A confused, almost fearful silence. Emily didn't call to gloat or mock. My mother didn't send passive-aggressive texts. My father didn't try to subtly extract financial details. The air, which had always been thick with their veiled criticisms, was now strangely clear. Then, the trickle began, and it was telling. My mother was the first to break the silence. A week later, Sarah, her voice on the phone was hesitant, almost meek. We saw the news reports about the transit app, and the mayor mentioned you. We had no idea you were working on something so important. There was no apology for calling me a maid, no acknowledgement of the humiliation, just a desperate attempt to reframe, to understand, to perhaps even claim a sliver of my success. I kept my response neutral, firm, and factual. Yes, Mom. As I've always told you, my work is very demanding and impactful. I'm glad the project is being well received. I offered no emotional hooks, no opening for a guilt trip or a subtle put-down. I simply stated the truth of my professional reality, without needing their validation or understanding. The conversation was short, ending with an awkward silence from her end. My father called next. His tone was a blend of grudging respect and thinly veiled curiosity. Sarah, about this project. The city council is praising it. This is significant. Are you planning to expand? What are the financial implications? He was trying to pivot, to absorb my success into his framework of business and influence, perhaps even see how he could leverage it. Dad, I replied, my voice calm. My work is under contract with the city, and many details are confidential. My finances are handled by my personal advisor, and I'm very comfortable. I didn't elaborate. I didn't offer to share. I explicitly closed the door to his usual attempts at control. He huffed, clearly frustrated by my impenetrable boundaries, but didn't push. He understood the language of power, and he knew I was speaking it. The most surprising interaction came from Michael. He called, not with questions about my work, but with what sounded like genuine awe. Sarah, seriously, the mayor calling you ma'am? That's insane. I always knew you were smart, but this is next level. You really built that whole system. There was no pretense, no comparison to his own career, just a raw, almost childlike wonder. He seemed to see me for the first time, not as his little sister to be outshone, but as a formidable professional in my own right. We had a long conversation, one of the most honest we'd ever had, discussing the technical challenges and the sheer scale of the project. It was a hesitant step towards a respectful peer relationship, a hopeful sign amidst the wreckage of our family dynamic. Emily, however, remained largely silent. Her initial texts were cold, dismissive, hinting at my lack of family loyalty. I simply didn't respond. I knew she was likely seething, unable to reconcile her narrative of my failure with the mayor's public acknowledgement. Her silence, in its own way, was a victory. She no longer had the power to define me, and that was something she couldn't tolerate. The most profound changes were internal. The constant anxiety that had been a low hum in my life for decades finally faded. The relentless need to prove myself, to earn approval, dissolved. I no longer spent mental energy anticipating their criticisms or crafting explanations. That mental space was now free, filled with creativity, self-reflection, and joy. My relationship with Dr. Sharma continued to be invaluable. She helped me process the emotional fallout, the lingering anger, and the unexpected sadness that sometimes surfaced as I grieved the family I wished I had. True liberation, Sarah, she explained, often comes with a period of mourning. You're letting go of a fantasy, and that's okay. What you're building now is authentic. I focused on cultivating relationships that nourished me. Lena, my unwavering rock, became even more central to my life. We celebrated my professional successes with genuine joy and supported each other through life's challenges. My colleagues, my team, and the city officials I worked with became a new kind of family, a chosen family built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and intellectual collaboration. In this world, my intelligence was celebrated, my dedication was applauded, and my contributions were profoundly valued. My professional life soared. The success of the Smart Transit Network led to more opportunities. I was invited to speak at national conferences, featured in prominent tech publications, and consulted by other major cities looking to implement similar initiatives. My name became synonymous with urban tech innovation. Financially, I was more secure than ever, building a portfolio that ensured not just comfort, but generational wealth. I could afford any luxury my family had ever dangled as a motivator, but I chose a lifestyle that reflected my values: impactful work, genuine connections, and quiet peace. I remember one afternoon, sitting in my beautiful, light-filled apartment, a space I had bought entirely on my own, designed to be my sanctuary, not a symbol of status. I looked out at the city skyline, knowing that my work was interwoven into its very fabric. The buses moving efficiently along their routes, the smart sensors monitoring environmental data, the seamless flow of people. I had helped build that. And the profound satisfaction of that realization was something no family approval, no amount of public praise could ever replace. I still attended some family gatherings, though far less frequently. My approach was now one of polite detachment. I no longer felt the need to make excuses or justify my choices. If Emily tried a subtle jab, I'd simply smile and pivot the conversation, denying her the reaction she craved. If my parents tried to offer unsolicited advice, I'd politely listen and then steer the conversation elsewhere. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. They were now the ones trying to regain some footing, some semblance of control, while I floated serenely above their attempts. They never, not once, brought up the Maid comment again. It was the elephant in the room, the unspoken humiliation that had backfired so spectacularly on Emily. And in that silence lay my ultimate victory. They had seen, they had heard, and they had understood, in the most public and undeniable way, that their narrative of my failure was a lie. The mayor's salute, that simple yet powerful ma'am, had been the linchpin. It wasn't just a title, it was a public affirmation of my identity, my competence, and my standing. It exposed the pettiness of my family's attempts to diminish me, and it cemented my liberation. My journey wasn't about seeking revenge. It was about defining my own success, on my own terms. It was about recognizing toxic patterns and having the courage to break free. It was about building a life filled with purpose, respect, and authentic connections, rather than chasing elusive approval. And it was about understanding that true family isn't always about blood, sometimes. It's about the people who see you, truly see you, and celebrate you for exactly who you are. I've learned that strength isn't about how loudly you can yell, but how calmly you can stand in your truth. It's about setting boundaries that protect your peace, even if it means losing some relationships. Because ultimately, the only approval that truly matters is your own. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to redefine family for yourself. And share this story with anyone who needs to hear that their worth is non-negotiable. My life now is rich, fulfilling, and authentic. The echo of failed has been replaced by the quiet confidence of ma'am. And that, I realized, was the only validation I ever truly needed.